Just 10 days out from the start of the season, we're going to continue to look at the opponent in that opener in Nebraska. Today, we're going to focus on the skill position players.
You are Locked On Northwestern, your daily podcast on the Northwestern Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Northwestern, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you for making Locked On Northwestern your first listen for anything and everything Northwestern. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, really anywhere. Totally free to listen, totally free to subscribe, and rate us 5 stars, whatever you want to. Whatever you want to rate us or comment. We also are now on YouTube, going on day 3 right now, so look for us there. Be sure to subscribe to that and don't miss out on any of our daily videos. Now, we know that we have started to look at Nebraska for the season opener. Well, today, we're going to start looking at the skill position players. And we're going to start with receivers, then we're going to talk a little bit about the tight ends, and then we're going to finish up with the running backs. These are the players that this Northwestern defense that is looking to take a significant step forward from last season after a significant dip from that 2020 season. They will face out on the perimeter, that they will face between the tackles running the ball and in the red zone with the tight ends. So we're going to start off with the receivers. Nebraska has a new receivers coach, Mickey Joseph, who has 23 years of college coaching experience. He's most recently was the receivers coach at LSU from 2017 to 2021, which, if you've been keeping up with LSU football at all in recent years, they've had some pretty daggum good receivers. If you look over that span, in that 5-year span, they had Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, DJ Chark, Russell Gage, Terrace Marshall, Racey McMath, and all those guys drafted in the NFL draft. And then they have Kayshon Boutte, who's going to be picked after this next year. But Mickey Joseph was part of that 2019 LSU coaching staff that went on to win the national championship. So he's somebody who has coached at the highest level, has produced elite talent in that 5 years at LSU, 6 players drafted in the NFL draft. Boutte will be next. It'll make it 7. 2 first-rounders and 2 second-rounders in that span. Of course, you have Justin Jefferson, who is a top 5 receiver already 2 years into his NFL career. And, I mean, if you're playing fantasy football this year in the NFL, he may be the second receiver off the board, and that behind Cooper Kupp. And then you had Jamar Chase, who last year in his rookie season won NFL Rookie of the Year, NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, that is. So he clearly can develop talent, and he's already made an impact in this Nebraska receivers room because he's brought somebody with some experience with him in Trey Palmer, a transfer from LSU, and we'll get to him in just a little bit. But we need to start with the losses that Nebraska is having in that wide receivers room. We're going to start with Samori Toure out of Portland, Oregon, 6'3", 190-pound receiver, who was the leading receiver on this Nebraska team in 2021. He was on the 2021 Biletnikoff Award watch list, was 3rd team All-Big Ten according to Pro Football Focus, was All-Big Ten honorable mention according to the media. He's a former Montana transfer, which in his time in Montana, he lit it up. He was the 2019 FCS All-American. He has the FCS playoff record for receiving yards in a game when he had 303 yards in the 2019 playoffs against Southeastern Louisiana. Also, he has Montana records all over the place. He has the single-season yardage record with 1,495 yards in that 2019 season. The receptions record for that season as well with 82, and the single game Montana receiving yards record with 303 in that playoff game against Southeastern Louisiana. He also has the Nebraska record for 100-yard receiving games in a season. And he had 5 last year in 2021. So in his career, he was somebody in his career at Nebraska, he caught 46 balls for 898 yards, 5 touchdowns, carried the ball 8 times for 63 yards and a touchdown as well. But he was the leading receiver on this Nebraska team in 2021. He's somebody that wasn't a very highly rated guy coming out of high school, but, developed into a player that was pretty dangerous and is a significant piece that Nebraska has to replace in that receivers room going into this 2022 season. Also with him, you have Levi Falk, who last season had 18 receptions for 223 yards and a touchdown, and he also had a rush for 18 yards. So between the two, Nebraska is looking to replace 64 receptions for 1,121 yards, 6 touchdowns, also 9 rushes, 81 yards, and a touchdown. They accounted for 29% of Nebraska's catches last season, 39% of the receiving yards, and 42% of the receiving touchdowns. So in the receivers room, that's a decent chunk that you have to replace, and you really have to start looking at the guys returning in this 2022 season to find out who's going to fill that role. So the person who's going to lead this Nebraska receiving corps of the returners is Omar Manning, a senior out of Lancaster, Texas, 6'4", 225 pounds. So very, very big frame. He out of high school, he went to TCU and then went to Kilgore College for junior college and has now found his way back to the Power 5 level at Nebraska. He was a JUCO All-American. He was a second-team JUCO All-American in 2019. 2020, he did not report any stats. 2021, he had 26 receptions for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. So as far as the true returners in this receiving corps, he's the guy to keep an eye on. He's the guy that Nebraska fans are probably expecting to step up and immediately take that lead role. He was a 4-star in the 2017 class coming out of high school, the number 158 national player in the country, number 26 wide receiver, and the number 25 player in the state of Texas. Coming out of junior college in 2020, he was a 4-star, the number 6 junior college player in the country, number 1 junior college wide receiver, and the number 1 junior college player in the state of Texas. In junior college, he had 50 catches for 1,029 yards and 10 touchdowns over 2 seasons. He's also a 2017 U.S. Army All-American. So he played in the U.S. Army All-American Bowl game. Very large frame, like we said before, and is somebody that Nebraska is counting on to replace that two-ray role of 800-plus yards. I mean, and there's still more yards to make up even in that receivers room. Next would be Xavier Betts, a junior out of Bellevue, Nebraska, 6'2", 200 pounds. So another guy who is not small by any stretch of the imagination. In his career, in 2020, he had 12 receptions for 131 yards and a touchdown. And last season, he had 20 receptions for 286 yards, did not have a touchdown in the receiving game, but carried the ball 3 times for 109 yards and a touchdown. He also returns kicks, so keep an eye on that in the opener. In the 2020 recruiting class, he was a 4-star. He was the number 112 player in the country, number 20 wide receiver, and the number 1 player in the state of Nebraska. He is the other name that Nebraska fans are looking to step up in this matchup against an experienced and talented Northwestern DBs group. But so he's actually higher rated coming out of high school than Omar Manning was. But these two are the ones to keep an eye on primarily of the returners. But other guys to look for are guys like Alante Brown, sophomore out of Chicago, Illinois, 5'11", 190. Went to Simeon High School in Chicago, and then went to St. Thomas More Prep in Connecticut. In 2020, he had 3 catches for 41 yards and 1 rush for 18 yards. Last year, 3 receptions for 30 yards. He also returns kicks. He's received a lot of praise from Mickey Joseph in this spring and fall camp. He's somebody who you could see step up in that third receiver role. In the 2020 recruiting class, he was a 3-star. He was the number 1 prep player in the country, the number 1 prep wide receiver, and the number 1 prep player in the state of Illinois, obviously. Coming out of high school in that 2019 class, so the year before, he was a 3-star as well. He was the number 632 player in the country, number 76 wide receiver, and number 4 player in the state of Illinois. So that's according to the 247 composite. According to 247's rankings itself, he was actually rated higher as a 4-star. Next, you have a guy like Brody Belt, a junior out of Omaha, Nebraska, 5'9", 185 pounds. So by far the smallest guy that we have mentioned so far. Went to Millard West High School. As a guy who has played running back and wide receiver to this point in his career. In 2019, he had 5 rushes for 32 yards. 2020, he did not record any stats. And 2021, he had 10 rushes for 48 yards, 6 receptions for 68 yards. He returns a lot of kicks. He was unranked in the 2018 recruiting class. He's a walk-on. But what makes him special is Mickey Joseph loves this kid. So you will find him on the field in some capacity. He could be in the slot. He has some versatility to him where he can line up anywhere on the field. And he could be a guy who creates matchup problems for Northwestern. But Mickey Joseph called him probably the best football player on this Nebraska team heading into 2022 and praised his football IQ. So look out for him to kind of be this Swiss Army knife. I honestly, he kind of, especially being at Nebraska and being a walk-on, rings a whole lot of Danny Woodhead bells to me. It's just, he's a guy that seems to have Danny Woodhead written all over him. It'll be interesting to see what role he carves out in this 2022 Nebraska offense and how he's used in this opener right off the bat against Northwestern in Dublin. Now, you do have some new additions, and we're going to focus mainly on the transfers because the freshmen are more likely to kind of get buried by the experience of the transfers and the returners on this roster. But as we mentioned before, Mickey Joseph came over from LSU. He brought somebody with him, and that is Trey Palmer, a junior out of Kentwood, Louisiana, 6'1", 190 pounds. Kentwood High School, played at LSU. In 2019, he had a single reception for 6 yards. In 2020, he saw his role expand, 10 receptions, 108 yards. And 2021, 30 receptions, 344 yards, 3 touchdowns. Returns a lot of kicks and a lot of punts. Had a punt return for a touchdown in 2019 and a kick return for a touchdown in 2020. So he is dangerous in the return game. Would not shock me at all if he becomes the lead return guy for this Nebraska team. He's an explosive athlete. He is dangerous in the open field, and he will be on the field in Dublin. And he's going to be a matchup problem just with his speed and his quickness in the open field. He was a 4-star in the 2019 recruiting class, the number 112 player in the country, number 18 wide receiver, and the number 6 player in the state of Louisiana. So coming out of high school, all the recruiting services recognized his talent. And that's how a guy from Louisiana, a 4-star, ended up at LSU, a place that was well known at the time for pumping out high-level receivers. But next up, you have Isaiah Garcia Castanada, a junior out of 29 Palms, California. 6 foot, 185 pounds. Went to 29 Palms High School. Went to Saddleback College. and then ended up at New Mexico State, which is when he transferred. After that, he transferred to Nebraska, which is where he is right now. In 2020, he had 5 receptions for 61 yards. 2021, he had 37 receptions for 578 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 rush for 6 yards at New Mexico State. He's another guy who can return kicks. They have plenty of guys in this receivers room who can handle duties, returning kicks, returning punts. It's a pretty explosive, versatile group, and they all have very interesting, different skill sets. It'll be interesting to see how they're used in this opener on August 27th. But in recruiting, he was not highly rated. 2-star in the 2020 class, according to the 247 rankings. He was not ranked in the 247 composite. He was the number 45 junior college wide receiver and the number 81 junior college player in the state of California. So that's your look at your receivers. A lot of different pieces, a lot of guys who have a little experience. I wouldn't say there's anybody who jumps off the page right now as this guy is going to be an absolute matchup nightmare, a problem, somebody who could take this experienced Northwestern DBs group for 150 yards and a couple touchdowns in the opener, especially in a new offense with a new quarterback and plenty of fresh faces. It'll be interesting. I think there will be a feeling out process over the course of this first game for Nebraska's receivers, because the roles have not, there's a big hole in that two-ray role, and somebody's going to have to fill it. So in just a couple minutes, we're going to start talking about these tight ends, and that's going to be a group that, has another staple of the offense that they're going to have to replace. So it's going to be interesting to see how they piece that together. So that's going to be what is next. You're hanging out with some of your friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds that you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. All right, so now that we've talked about the wide receivers, we're going to move to the other pass catchers on this offense. We're going to look at the tight ends. And the big loss of this tight ends room is Austin Allen out of Aurora, Nebraska, an enormous human being, which is just seems to be a just constant theme when we talk about this Nebraska team. 6'9", 255 pounds. This guy may have been the most important piece of this 2021 Nebraska offense and is going to be a huge part to replace for them going into 2022. He was a team captain on the 2021 team. He was the 2021 Big Ten tight end of the year. First team All Big Ten, according to the media. Second team All Big Ten, according to the coaches. He was on the 2021 Mackey Award watch list. He was the 2021 Nebraska Offensive MVP. He also has plenty of Nebraska records. He has the single-game receiving yards record by a tight end with 143 last season against Wisconsin. He has a single-season receptions record by a tight end with 38. He has the single-season receiving yards record by a tight end with 602 yards in 2021. And last season, he also has the record for 100-yard receiving games by a tight end in a season with 2. So right there, that should give you a good picture on the impact that Austin Allen has had at Nebraska and the impact he had on that 2021 team. Over his career in 2018, he had 2 receptions for 54 yards. Then in 2019, you start to see the role steadily increase. 7 receptions, 83 yards, 1 rush for 2 yards, interestingly enough. 2020, he had 18 receptions, 236 yards, and a touchdown. And then last year, as the offensive MVP for the team, 38 receptions, 602 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Coming out of high school, he was a 3-star in the 2017 class, the number 812 player in the country, number 38 tight end, and the number 1 player in the state of Nebraska in that class. But so he's a huge piece, a talented piece, an enormous frame, an absolute red zone threat with his size and his length. So Nebraska has to find a way to replace this guy, and that's when they'll turn to Travis Vocaleck, a senior out of Springfield, Missouri. Another huge guy, 6'7", 260 pounds. Went to Kickapoo High School, which is a fun name, and initially enrolled at Rutgers. In 2019, he transferred from Rutgers to Nebraska, sat out that 2019 season. Another big frame guy. In 2017 at Rutgers, he had 1 reception for 14 yards. 2018, you saw flashes of what he could be. 16 catches, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then in 2020, 9 receptions, 91 yards, and last season, 11 receptions, 127 yards. He did not have the feature role as a tight end that Austin Allen had, but he has shown flashes. He showed flashes at Rutgers. He is a good run blocker. They talk about how good he is in the run game with how big he is at 6'7", 260 pounds. Coming in out of the 2017 recruiting class, he was a 3-star, the number 2,030 player in the country, number 94 tight end, and number 12 player in the state of Missouri. With him trying to fill that Austin Allen role will be Thomas Fidone II, a redshirt freshman out of Council Bluffs, Iowa. 6'6", 235, another big frame. Highly rated player coming out of high school. 4-star in the 2021 recruiting class. Has not played to this point due to injury. Has not registered stats, but was the number 92 player in the 2021 class, number 2 tight end, and the number 1 player in the state of Iowa. So he's somebody that has the natural talent, has the frame to be a threat and help piece together, almost Moneyball, this Austin Allen role, because you may not be able to fully replace Austin Allen with one guy, but you may be able to somewhat piece together a few guys to kind of fill his many roles. Next up is Chris Hickman, a sophomore out of Omaha, Nebraska, 6'5", 215 pounds. Bounced back and forth from wide receiver to tight end in his career. 2019, he had a single catch, did not go for any yards. Repeated that performance in 2020, and last year, 3 receptions for 90 yards. He's a 3-star in the 2019 class, the number 445 player in the country, number 18 tight end, and the number 2 player in the state of Nebraska. He's somebody who has a little bit of experience. You'll see him on the field. I don't expect him to be one of the 2 feature guys. I expect that to be the first 2 that we talked about. But with him is a guy like Chancellor Brewington out of Chandler, Arizona, a senior, 6'3", 220 pounds, originally enrolled at Northern Arizona. In 2017, in his first action at Northern Arizona, 31 catches, 396 yards, 2 touchdowns. 2018, 23 catches, 246 yards, and a touchdown. Redshirted in 2019. 2020 did not play. And then 2021 here at Nebraska, after transferring to Nebraska, he had 3 catches for 20 yards and a touchdown. Was a 4-star in the 2017 class. Actually, no, he's a 3-star in the 2017 class, excuse me. Number 743 player overall, number 107 wide receiver, and number 13 player in the state of Arizona. But somebody who has some decent college experience can, again, as you try to piece together the enormous hole that Austin Allen leaves in this offensive production from 2021, if you're Nebraska, he could be a guy to keep an eye on. All of these guys, kind of different skill sets, a couple really big frames, really big, scrawny frame in Chris Hickman, and then kind of a smaller guy in Chancellor Brewington. So that's the tight ends room. That's the pieces that the Northwestern linebackers and the DBs will match up with in the passing game. Now let's move to the Brine Backs, and that's going to be what we talk about next. And we are going to start with the losses. So did not lose anybody to graduation or to the NFL, but did lose a couple of transfers, and that would be Marvin Scott, the third 5'9", 205-pound running back, transferred to FAU in his 2 years at Nebraska in 2020. He had 24 rushes for 64 yards, 2 receptions for 17 yards. Last season, 17 rushes, 66 yards, 2 touchdowns, and also had a catch for 9 yards. Leaving with him is Savion Morrison, a 6 foot, 212-pound running back that's transferred to Kansas. Did not record any stats in 2020. 2021 had 30 rushes for 116 yards, a touchdown, 3 receptions for 13 yards. So between the two of them, you lose 47 rushes for 182 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 4 catches for 22 yards. Not a lot of production that you have to replace. You've got a lot of guys coming back. And the two that are generating the most buzz, that this Northwestern run game that struggled mightily in 2021 is going to have to stack up with, is the first being Gabe Irvin, a redshirt freshman out of Buford, Georgia, 6 foot, 215 pounds. 2021, he had 37 rushes, 133 yards, 2 touchdowns, played in 4 games, started 2 of them, but suffered a season-ending injury at number 3 Oklahoma last year and redshirted the rest of that season. In the 2021 recruiting class, he was a 3-star, number 692 player in the country, number 43 running back, and the number 61 player in the state of Georgia. The other guy making noise, weirdly enough, and this blew my mind in my research a little bit, but we're talking about a school in Nebraska that has 2 guys who played at the same high school, kind of leading the pack, making the most noise in the running back room. And that is Anthony Grant, a junior from Buford, Georgia. Both guys played at Buford High School. 5'11", 200 pounds. Anthony Grant has had a little more interesting road to Nebraska. Enrolled at FSU. Transferred to New Mexico Military Institute, a junior college. And then has now found his way to Nebraska. So at FSU in 2018, he was used primarily as a kick returner. He had 11 returns for 247 yards for a 22.5-yard average. So keep in mind, could be a guy you see in the kick return game. There's plenty of guys that have some experience with that. But his junior college numbers at New Mexico Military Institute are kind of crazy. In 2019, he had 241 rushes for 1,730 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 16 receptions for 76 yards and a touchdown. So enormous production in junior college. And, you know, coming out of junior college, he was a 3-star, number 9 national junior college player in the country, number 1 junior college running back, and the number 2 junior college player out of the state of Georgia. I find it interesting that he was rated as a junior college player out of Georgia, even though he played at New Mexico Military Institute. But coming out of high school, he was a 3-star as well. He was the number 403 player in the country, number 17 running back, and the number 43 player in the state of Georgia. But Irvin and Grant are getting the most buzz and getting the most run with the ones so far in fall camp. They will likely be your number 1 and number 2 guys out on the field. But you also have a guy with a lot of experience like Ramir Johnson, a sophomore out of Oradell, New Jersey, 5'10", 185 pounds. In 2019, his first action had 21 rushes for 64 yards and a touchdown, had 1 reception for 12 yards. 2020, he had 8 rushes for 30 yards and a touchdown, 6 receptions for 33 yards. And last year, the production spiked partially due to the injury of Gabe Ervin, but he had 112 rushes for 495 yards, 4 touchdowns, 16 receptions, 197 yards, 2 touchdowns. Coming out of high school, he was a 3-star in the 2019 class, number 434 player in the country, number 32 running back, and number 11 player in the state of New Jersey. He's somebody who, I think, to the surprise of Nebraska fans, has been passed over by Ervin and Grant, especially with Ervin coming off a season-ending injury last year. But he's somebody that I would expect to see the field. Brian Applewhite, the running backs coach for Nebraska, has compared him to Brian Westbrook, which is a pretty unique skill set, kind of smaller guy, can make plays out of the backfield, an Eagles legend. But he will be on the field. I'd be shocked if he's not. But the final guy to keep an eye on is Jacquez Yant, a sophomore out of Tallahassee, Florida. Interesting that so many guys from the Southeast found their way to Nebraska. 6'2", 235 pounds. So a really big back, a bruiser for sure. In 2021, he had 47 rushes for 294 yards and a touchdown, 1 reception for 5 yards. So he's not a huge threat in the passing game, but he's a big physical back. He'll probably see him in short yardage, I would imagine. That probably fits his skill set the best out of any of these guys, although Ervin is not a small back by any stretch. In the recruiting class of 2020, he was a 3-star according to 247. I don't believe he was ranked in the 247 composite. He's number 122 running back and the number 249 player in the state of Florida. So basically, this is the running back group you're going to see in Dublin. These 4 guys are going to be the ones to keep an eye on. Ervin and Grant out the gate. Definitely Ramir Johnson. The experience factor will absolutely put him on the field. Same thing with Yant. Brian Applewhite said he wants to use 3 backs for sure. So I would expect to see probably in the first game all 4 of these guys all have pretty interesting different skill sets. You have Ervin coming off an injury. And then you have Grant, who you've seen handle a ridiculous workload in 12 games of junior college. And then you finally have the 2 guys who kind of pieced together a decent amount of production last year, probably about 700, 800 yards between the 2 of them in Yant and Johnson. I would expect Johnson to probably be used a little more versatilely out of the backfield, try to make some plays in the passing game. But these are the faces to know for this revamped Northwestern front 7, the run defense that truly it would be hard to take a step back. I would say that it would be difficult to not see improvement. But I do think it is vital for Northwestern to shut down the run and really test these transfer Nebraska quarterbacks, test their chemistry with these receivers and tight ends in the passing game. Are they all on the same page? There's plenty of new faces. There's plenty of guys that don't have a ton of experience and don't have any real live in-game experience with the actual 2 transfer quarterbacks that will have a chance to be on the field. I think it'll be very interesting to see how this Nebraska offense matches up with Northwestern. But I think the secondary will be able to handle its business for Northwestern against this group of skill position players It's just a matter of, can the front seven step up, show significant improvement, kind of bounce back to that 2020 front seven, and be able to shut down the run game? Because if you do that, I think Northwestern will be in this game in Dublin the entire time. No matter what the offense does, I think they can be in the game the entire time. But yeah, today we talked about the wide receivers, we talked about the tight ends, and we talked about the running backs at Nebraska, and kind of guys to keep an eye on in this opener, who are going to be the faces that are going to be the biggest threats, and how I think this Northwestern defense can stack up with them. Hey, and make sure you know what your team is up against across the Big Ten with Locked On Big Ten. Every day, host Nate Dickinson and local experts of Locked On take you across the Big Ten in 30 minutes. Make Locked On Big Ten your second listen. Locked On Big Ten.